They didn't just take my dock. They took the last piece of my wife. That old wooden platform by the bend of the river wasn't just where I fished or launched a kayak, it was where Lydia and I watched the sun dip behind the pines, cider in hand, wrapped in blankets when the frost came early. It was where she used to sketch the willow trees, where we laughed until we cried, and where I scattered her ashes the day I promised her I'd never leave this place behind. So when I stepped outside one crisp fall morning and saw a woman I barely knew, clipboard in hand, standing smugly beside a backhoe pointing straight at it like it was hers, something inside me went very, very still. Her name was Dolores Redmond, and she had recently declared herself president of the Brookshore Riverfront Association, the so-called BRA. She lived 3 houses down, a retiree from some corporate HR department, who decided that her golden years were best spent policing where people put their trash cans and what shade of beige a front door should be. What she didn't know, or maybe didn't care to check, was that my land wasn't part of her little fiefdom. Never had been. I bought this slice of riverbank 30 years ago, when it was just woods and mud and a half-rotted fishing shack. My wife and I had built everything here: the dock, the garden, the tiny cedar home tucked under the bluff, with our own hands and stubborn hearts. So when Dolores waved that fake map around and claimed the dock was a shared amenity, I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just turned around, walked back inside, shut the door, and whispered to myself one promise: you want a river war? You'll get one. Now, I may be retired, but I'm not soft. I was a civil engineer for 35 years. I helped design half the bridges in this county. I know how rivers move. I know what they need to shift, and how quietly, patiently, they can reshape the land beneath your feet until one day you wake up and the world looks different. First, I dug through my old files: land surveys, deeds, plat maps going back to before the subdivision even existed. I confirmed what I already knew: my dock sat squarely on private land. But then I found something else, something Dolores clearly hadn't counted on. Turns out, the Brookshore development had been built right along what used to be a classified floodplain, land rezoned under some sketchy deal years ago. Their homes were only dry because the river flowed in just the right way, thanks to a natural bend reinforced decades ago by, well, me. A slight shift in that flow. Let's just say it would be noticeable. So I got to work. Quietly. Legally. Filed for permits: erosion control, environmental restoration, even invasive species management. Nobody batted an eye. I said I was rehabilitating an old oxbow channel that used to curve along my upstream property. Which was true. I just didn't mention the part where redirecting the water through that channel would pull the current away from the BRA's fancy shared dock entirely, leaving it sitting dry and crooked like a forgotten pier in a desert. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I called up an old friend, Marcus Dunley, ex-Army combat engineer, same unit I served in back in the day. We'd built roads in the jungle and bridges under fire. If anyone knew how to reintroduce a river to its old path without setting off alarms, it was Marcus. When I told him what Dolores did about the dock, the ashes, the clipboard, he didn't hesitate. He said, "I'll bring the bourbon and the boots." Marcus arrived with a trailer full of surveying gear and 2 weeks' worth of bourbon. We camped out on the back porch, mapped elevation drops, tested water flow with drones, and slowly, methodically, coaxed the river back toward the oxbow. We didn't trench. We guided. That's the trick with rivers. You don't force them. You give them a better idea. While Dolores was busy organizing her big River Unity Jubilee complete with themed paddle boats and shrimp cocktail pyramids, Marcus and I were laying biodegradable erosion mats and planting native reeds along the new channel. We even built a small wooden gate upstream, hidden under a pile of driftwood, in case we needed to let the full flow loose in one go. By the second week, the current had started whispering its intentions. The new channel shimmered clean and cool. Fish returned. Ducks nested. My side of the river began to sing again. And nobody suspected a thing. Until Lester showed up. Lester Bingham was Dolores' right-hand man. If Beige could walk and carry a clipboard, it'd be him. He came snooping around one morning asking questions. I handed him copies of my permits and told him I was restoring native wetlands for biodiversity. He squinted like he'd just smelled spoiled milk and mumbled something about compliance. But by then, it was already too late. The water had made its choice. The day of the River Jubilee came fast. Dolores had set up white tents along the shore. There were gold-lettered signs, a harpist, even a man in a rented tuxedo directing boat traffic. She wore a sash that read, "Madam Chairwoman," and a tiara like she was Queen of the Nile. Marcus and I watched from across the bend two old men in lawn chairs sipping coffee that wasn't coffee. The river gleamed, perfect. And then, it happened. The first kayak, covered in streamers, tried to glide into the community dock zone and got stuck in the mud. The paddlers laughed at first, until they realized they weren't moving. Then the second boat, a rented pontoon, ran aground even harder, bottoming out with a metallic groan. Panic spread like a dropped match in dry grass. Dolores was waving her arms, barking orders, but the water wasn't listening. The river had dropped nearly a foot in that bend and risen just as much on my side. Guests started turning around. One guy jumped out and immediately sank ankle-deep in muck. His wife screamed. Someone slipped. Classical music cut out. The tiara fell. It was beautiful. By evening, the entire BRA shoreline set abandoned plates of shrimp curling in the sun, folding chairs half sunk in mud. Meanwhile, families floated peacefully down my channel, asking if it was part of the Jubilee route. I smiled and said, it might be. They waved. The fish jumped. The ducks applauded. That night, Dolores marched across the public footbridge red-faced, soaking wet, and absolutely fuming. What did you do to the river, Hal? She screamed from my yard like I'd personally summoned Poseidon. Nothing illegal, I said, holding up the stack of permits. Just managing erosion, restoring some lost habitat. She threatened lawsuits. I offered her tea. 2 days later, a letter came official-looking, full of legal jargon, accusing me of malicious alteration of water flow. I sent back copies of everything. And then I added one thing. A report from the county hydrologist stating that my project had improved flood resilience in the region and was recommended as a model restoration. That little paragraph hit harder than a sledgehammer. A week later, a journalist showed up, young woman named Bailey from a local news site. Said she'd gotten an anonymous tip. I invited her in, poured iced tea, and laid it all out: maps, permits, the forged reclassification letter, even the photo of my wife's bench in pieces beside a pile of rubble. Bailey didn't say much, just nodded, took notes, and left. 3 days later, the headline dropped. Riverfront resident accuses HOA of fraud, environmental damage. Then everything broke loose. HOA board members resigned. An audit began. Turns out, Dolores had been using association funds to pay her nephew's construction company, the same one that tore out my dock. Even worse, she'd forged official county letterheads on multiple documents. The county launched an investigation. Her lawyer dropped her. Neighbors stopped talking to her. The Jubilee banner was still flapping in the wind a week later, faded and crooked like a forgotten dream. And then came the storm. Mid-June, the biggest downpour in a decade hit the valley. Rain came hard and fast, swelling every ditch and culvert. But my side, reinforced with Marcus erosion nets, native reeds, and reinforced berms, held strong. The new channel absorbed the flood beautifully. The BRA side? Not so much. Without proper drainage or water flow, their old dock basin turned into a stagnant pool. 3 houses flooded, including Dolores. Emergency crews showed up. Her patio furniture floated past her like debris from a sunken kingdom. She stood in the driveway, yelling into a phone, soaked to the bone. The river didn't care. It just flowed. The court case was short and brutal. My lawsuit hit every note: destruction of private property, emotional damages, trespassing. The county backed me. The environmental board praised me. Dolores folded. The settlement came with a notarized public apology. I framed it and hung it above the new bench. The dock came next, sturdier this time, built higher above the bend, with cedar planks and rust-proof anchors. I carved Lydia's name deep into the wood, sealed it twice, and surrounded it with wild blue phlox, her favorite. By August, a county rep visited a woman named Shiloh. She walked the land, tested the soil, studied the reeds, and said, "This is one of the best wetland recoveries we've seen in years." She asked if they could use the site as a teaching model. I said sure, as long as they left the bench alone. Now, every month, a group of kids comes by to learn about rivers, wide-eyed, muddy-booted, curious. I welcome them all. Let them see what peace looks like. Let them know that sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It flows quiet and steady like water finding its way home. The BRA dissolved in autumn. A quiet vote, barely attended. Dolores moved away, no one knows where, no one asks. Her house sold to a young couple who don't care about newsletters or bylaws. They wave sometimes. That's enough. And me? I sit by the river most evenings, tea in hand. Lydia's bench beside me. The air smells like pine and damp soil. The current hums its old song. The land remembers. And if you listen close, you can almost hear the river say it, too. We're home again. If you've ever dealt with overreach, HOA drama, or just fought to keep something sacred from being stolen, let me know in the comments. Do you think Glenn was right to fight back the way he did? What would you have done in his shoes? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs a little reminder. Nature, like justice, always finds a way.